3, 2, 1. Quorum Radio, baby. Okay, Charlie, the big day, of course, is on the 30th of July, 1975. The place is Detroit metro area, Bloomfield Township. At 2 p.m., there's a meeting. The meeting is for Jimmy Hoffa at the Malchus Red Fox restaurant. Okay, we know Jimmy Hoffa is in Detroit. Where is the Irishman, Frank Sheeran?
Frank is on his way to Detroit with the two women, that is Russell's wife and Frank's second wife, and Frank driving. And the way Frank expressed it, the whole thing, meaning the whole matter, he also used the word matter for murder. The whole thing about Jimmy Hoffa was built around the wedding. And Russell Buffalino had a cousin named Bill Buffalino, although they called themselves cousins. I have a lot of, Italians have a lot of these cousins. I got a lot of cousins myself that are not blood, you know.
Yeah, sure.
And so they called each other cousins. And Bill Buffalino's daughter was getting married in Detroit. And gangsters from all over the country were coming to that wedding. And Russell and his wife were being driven there by Frank. And Frank was on his way to the wedding.
Anyway, so bottom line is, so they're going to a wedding. Russell Buffalino's relatives was Jimmy Hoffa supposedly going to go to the wedding too, or not?
No, he was on the outs. He wouldn't have been invited, and if he had been invited, he wouldn't have gone. But Frank made arrangements. Jimmy was trying to take back the Union, and there were high-ups like Tony Provenzano that did not want him taking back the Union. This was after Jimmy got out of jail, and he was campaigning
and Jimmy
to take
had
the Union
Provenzano,
back.
Didn't he? Punched out Tony Pro, right? Didn't he in jail?
Well, they had a fight.
Fist fight?
They had a fight in Lewisburg prison. That's in the movie, and described very nicely in the book. Yeah, and so Jimmy wanted to get the Union back, and he had enemies that did not want him anywhere near the Union anymore from now on, and so Jimmy wanted to have a meeting. When these mobsters came to Detroit, Jimmy expected that he would have a meeting with Russell Buffalino and Frank and try to square his beef with people like Tony Provenzano and get back and take back the Union. And he was set up, and he was killed. He thought he was going to a meeting in a house. And we found the house, Frank and I found the house where he killed Hoffa. It's on Beaverland Street in Detroit, and there's a photograph of the house in the book. And that was where
that house apparently was being.
Yeah, it was for rent at the time, but it was available for the mafia. In fact, as Frank explains on tape, all my interviews of him, by the way, are on tape. And Frank explains on tape enough to let us all know that the redhead, who was in addition to being a hitman, was a commercial real estate broker, and he secured that house for use by Frank. And so Frank took Jimmy to the house. And I guess I'm telling the story. Okay, but buy the book anyway. So,
right.
Anyway, look at this.
The question I want to ask you.
Yeah.
No, sure. It's in the book. It's in the book, and it was officially depicted in the movie. They go into the house and blood spatters, and I want to talk to you about something that's been on my mind. I mean, Michael Francese. Poo-pooed it all, and he went beyond poo-pooing it. He lambasted the movie The Irishman, and he said, I'm going to quote you, Charlie, what he said. Michael Francese, somebody I know, stated that it was just basically a lie. And he said, The Irishman is not a truthful depiction of what happened. The story was a complete lie. There's no truth to the story. He mentions a couple of little details, but and also that he's been disproved. Now, I assume he's talking about your book, your thesis. He's been disproved, and including by law enforcement as well as people in the mob. So I want to give you an opportunity to answer Michael Franzese. I know you have a 57-page addendum that's evidentiary concerning corroborating Frank Sheeran's version of how it went down and Frank Sheeran's implication in that crime. So, what are the big facts, as they say, that corroborate Frank Sheeran's participation in the assassination, in the murder of Jimmy Hoffa?
Well, it's pretty easy. Sonny Franzese, is that his name? No, that's the father, right? Sonny Franzese?
Yeah, the Michael Franzese. His father's Sonny. He's Michael Franzese.
Yeah, and he knows because of what? He has
he claims. Well, he claims that he says he has a tape recording in which he claims that he has a tape recording that details exactly what happened to the body. He says it's in a very, very wet place. But what did Frank tell you about the disposal of Hoffa's body? And he didn't do the carpentry work on this job, right?
Right, he did not. And the Bagnasco Funeral Parlor in Detroit took care of the body, and they had it cremated, as the movie depicts. Bagnasco Funeral Parlor in Detroit.
Right.
And there are so many instances of legitimate corroboration from a jury trial lawyer and an expert in what constitutes corroboration and what is usable evidence. And there are so many instances of corroboration in the book that we had to add the 57 pages.
Yeah, sure. It wasn't
add these instances of corroboration. Now, there are people out there that want to share the spotlight, and they come forward only after my movie comes along. Right. Now, all of a sudden, they know something. Where have they been for 10 years, 5 years, 3 years even? They've been nowhere. They've not even spoken on the Hoffa disappearance to anyone for any reason. And now, all of a sudden, they see an opportunity to get their name spread out and to share the spotlight. And I can't oblige them. I can't oblige them. They don't know what they're talking about. But the best corroboration I can give you is I was attending a book signing in Delaware, in Bethany Beach, Delaware.
Right.
This was when the paperback had just come out. The hardback had been out, and now it was replaced by the paperback. And the paperback had an epilogue, which the hardback did not have. And a man hands me his copy of the paperback and says, "Can you make it out to Bob Garrity?" And I said, "How do I know that name?" And he said, "Well, I was the case agent." That means he was the FBI agent in charge of the case of the Hoffa disappearance, Bob Garrity.
Oh, wow.
And I said, you're not going anywhere, Bob. Sit down here with me. Well, Bob worked, and all of it's in my book. And these people, they come out and say things, and they know how the book contradicts them easily. They know that. But that doesn't stop them. They have no shame. And so so Bob invited me to Pittsburgh. He was the head of security for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And probably still is. Yeah. And probably still is, but he was head of security for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He invited me to Pittsburgh. I got a hotel room, and he brought his entire file over to me. And he let me take it to a Kinko's and copy most of it. Some of it he did not let me copy because it was not originally FBI material. So there's a scene in the book about New York police at the Vesuvio doing surveillance right after Hoffa disappeared, and they're doing surveillance. And Frank Sheeran, who's there reporting to Fat Tony Salerno, who's sitting in the back room. Frank Sheeran is there. The redhead is there. Sal Bergoglio is there to report how the hit went down, and that it went down without a hitch to Fat Tony Salerno. So they're there. Now they spot these NYPD undercover surveillance people, and they think these undercover surveillance people are there for them, and that somehow within 4 days they have figured out the Hoffa disappearance. What are they doing here? These people, right? It scared the piss out of them, out of the real criminals. In the meantime, the NYPD, they knew what they were seeing. And so they were. And Frank Sheeran walked in. He was wearing a gold ring, a gold watch. He sits next to. He sits right next to John the Redhead Francis. He tells Francis that the FBI has entered the case, and this is all in their case records, right? The NYPD. Well, he didn't let me copy that. He didn't let me take it to Kinko because it was an NYPD record, but he let me hand copy it. So that evening, in my
very nice.
I put that in the book. It's in the book. It's all in the book. You know, it just boggles the mind.
So let me get Charlie before I forget.
Yeah.
Okay, because this is so important because they've dug up the Meadowlands and I don't know people's back porches, backyards.
You want to hear it? You want to hear about the Meadowlands?
Well, yeah, okay, of course. Please
quickly
go right ahead.
Well, quickly. Bob Garrity. And by the way, Bob and I hung out for 2 or 3 years. We went to Detroit together. We did some investigating, and we tried to interview Chucky through a contact. I have an organized crime in Florida. I got Chucky's contact info, Chucky O'Brien, and we called
his adopted son or his foster son.
His adopted son,
Jimmy Hoffa.
And we called him and told him we'll be right down there to Boca Raton. We want to meet with you. And he said no dice, and he put us on to his lawyer. And then he's got a book. This guy,
Yeah, he recently passed away.
Foster's son.
He recently passed away.
I heard that, but the son, his so-called half son, has a book. I mean, it's nonsensical, but it's such a big deal. Let's not forget how big this movie was, how big this book was. So the claim jumpers are out there. I struck gold, and the claim jumpers are out there trying to get a piece of my claim.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Bob and I tried to interview the man, and then all of a sudden he's got a story to tell, but not to us. He knows better than to come to us.
So the Meadowlands.
Okay, so Bob told me that Russell owned a lot of stuff and a lot of interest in a lot of stuff, and Russell owned a piece of the architectural firm that built the Meadowlands Giant Stadium, and so they had no choice but to check it out, and they did. And they used one of those radar machines, that go down deep in the earth to see if there was anything down there. And of course there wasn't. But he said we didn't believe it. But when you got Russell owning a piece of the architectural firm, you got to look. You got to check it out.
Yeah, sure. And so what happened after the Dinasco?
And I'm pretty sure that's in the book. It's in the book about the the
Meadowlands.
Meadowlands. There you go.
Right. So then you said the Dinasco funeral home. I guess they had a crematorium.
No, the crematoriums are in cemeteries in Ketchum and in Detroit, Michigan, in the state of Michigan. And so practically in walking distance of the house where the murder occurred, there was a crematorium. There was a cemetery and a crematorium.
Right. So they took it there. It wasn't a long drive. And was it immediate? Was it immediate? It was immediate.
Immediately. Steve and Tom Andretta were the cleaners, and they were in the back kitchen. and when Hoffa was killed. And Frank went out the front door that he'd come in, left the gun on Hoffa's body, and had nothing to do with the body. And then Steve and Tom put the body in the trunk of a car and took it to the crematorium and had it cremated.
Uh-huh.
And to get something cremated, the book explains, was so easy in those days. There was no paperwork. There was a single sheet of paper that a funeral parlor owner gave you as the man disposing of the body, and you could take it to wherever you took it, and you could actually do it yourself. You could actually push the button, put the body in the crematorium, push the button, and in an hour everything would be gone. Wow!
So what happened to the cremains, the ashes, the bone chips?
There's nothing. There's no evidentiary value. To the cremains, there's no evidentiary value. There's no anything to it.
Right, but what do they do with it? What do they do with the cremains?
Well, what they do is they use a squeegee scraper.
Yeah.
And they scrape them together into a plastic box. And the plastic box goes on the shelf in the crematorium of unclaimed cremains.
Oh my!
And so it just becomes one of many unclaimed cremains.
So then,
I checked all this out with
sure. So then, at some point, so you checked it out with a funeral home director.
A funeral director. Yeah, funeral director who took me through all the paces.
So, did he at any point say that unclaimed cremains or cremated remains are then taken to like a basically a municipal potter's field or someplace where disposition of bodies, disposal of bodies,
they're thrown out.
And
after going unclaimed for some period of time, they are discarded. They're thrown out. They're put
discarded in the waste paper basket in a dumpster, or buried in a cemetery.
No, not buried at all. Just thrown away. And I guess that there was a near this particular one. There were two of them that we checked out, but near this particular one, which was closest to the house on Beaverland Street, there was a big refuse basket, and on the grounds. And I guess that's it then. It was, it went into that refuse basket.
Right. And so, by the way, in the movie itself, there's a scene in the trailer where, there's a really big gaudy gold ring. What's that all about, Charlie?
The trailer of the movie. I thought you were talking about a physical trailer.
No. The movie trailer.
No. Frank, here's what happened. Russell Buffalino had 3 rings made up. Each of them had a $3 gold piece surrounded by diamonds.
Wow.
And in the movie, Russell Buffalino gives one of the rings to Frank and tells Frank that I had 3 of those rings made up. One for me, one for you, and one for Angelo Bruno, the head of the Bruno crime family.
Right.
Actually, he had 3 rings made up, one for Big Billy D'Elia, not Angelo Bruno.
Uh-huh.
One for Frank, one for himself, and one for his underboss, Big Billy D'Elia. And for whatever reason, the movie people decided not to include Big Billy D'Elia in the rings. And I think they were giving Harvey Keitel a bigger part. And in fact, I know they were, because the researcher called me that they used when I came back to Idaho after working on the script. Then they began filming, and I would come and go. but I got a call out here, and they wanted to know, Bob and Marty wanted to know if Angelo Bruno would have been invited to Frank Sheeran Appreciation Night. And I said to them, of course, he'd have been invited to Frank Sheeran Appreciation Night. And if he wasn't, it would have been an insult.
Oh,
and if he didn't go to Frank Sheeran Appreciation Night, he would have been insulting them. So you can write Harvey into that scene. And that's what they did. So I think they wanted to give him the ring as well, just give him something to do, in the film.
Sure.
But in real life, it was Big Billy D'Elia.
So
Frank wore it every day. I mean, Frank wore that ring every day. I don't know.
What happened to the ring? I guess Frank's daughters have it still?
Yeah, the children, the grandchildren have it.
Right,
and, and the other piece of jewelry was the watch that at Frank Sheeran Appreciation Night, Jimmy Hoffa presented to Frank. It was a presentation from Hoffa. It wasn't a gift from Hoffa.
Right.
Yeah.
So then,
colors and paper.
So one of the things that, of course, happened. I mean, you had a lot of time to talk to Frank Sheeran. You had a lot of interesting.
Over and over. If he told me something, 6-8 months later, 4 years later, I could bring it up and see how.
Right, you would, and by the way, you would sometimes bring it up just to see if you maintain consistency, right?
Yeah, that's part of it. And the energy in his voice you want to hear. With actors, they don't want to rehearse too much because they don't want to use up the energy that goes with the scene.
Right.
And I'm listening more than I'm looking. I'm listening for energy to his voice. And how I got the killing of Crazy Joey Gallo.
Yeah.
We were at a retirement party for a Teamster named Barney, who doubled as a driver for Frank.
Right.
And there's a photograph in the book of Frank and me at the head of a table, and beer bottles galore on the table. It's a real beer bottle kind of night,
Yeah, sure.
And Frank is in the place of honor, not Barney, who's retiring to move to Florida with his son, but Frank. So as we are sitting down, I would catch him off guard at times, and as we are sitting down in those respective seats, and I've got my tape recorder with me, and I said to him, why did Russell have so much faith in you? And Frank said, well, if I tell you that, I got to tell you something else. I said, Frank, this is no time for hedging your bets. This is not the time for holding out on me.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? And Frank says, and he'd been drinking a little bit of beer, And Frank says, you ever heard of Joe Gallo? Now there were two Joe Gallos, because Crazy Joey Gallo, and there's Joe of the Colombo family, and there's Joe Gallo of the Genovese family. A higher up than Crazy Joey Gallo.
Okay.
And he says to me, did you ever hear of Joe Gallo? So I say, now, do you mean, which one do you mean? You mean the one they call Crazy Joey? And he said, yeah. You ever hear of him? I said, of course. He's a fresh kid. Now, that's a signal that he's got something to tell me. I mean, that's a signal for any interrogator, not a special signal between Frank and me. It's the signal for any interrogator that there's some confession about to happen. And he called him a fresh kid, and then I followed up on it. And he said to me right there that night, and you'll see me in that photograph reaching under the table to get my tape recorder closer to him and away from the noise of the people. And he said to me that
the party. Yeah.
I took care of that matter. So I knew I had to question him on it, obviously, and over time I did, because I knew, and the world knew, there were two movies, and 6 books about Crazy Joey Gallo. And they all claimed that Crazy Joey Gallo was killed by 3 Italian gunmen who burst in on him at Umberto's Clam House and opened fire. These 3 Italian gunmen, not a lone big Irish Swede walking in by himself. And so, is this true? Now I began to work on them, and I had to work on them because, and I had to put it in the book because my publisher said, "Do you really want that in the book? It could be controversial." And I said, "Look, as a lawyer who investigated other lawyers for wrongdoing in my career as on the censor committee of the state bar appointed by the state Supreme Court to investigate other lawyers for wrongdoing, I couldn't possibly offer this as the truth if it isn't. And if it turns out that somebody comes forward and says, 'Wait a minute, I was there that night. There was no lone gunman. It was 3 gunmen.
Right.
I was there that night.' Then I'm stuck with that. And the public has a right to know that as much as they have a right to know whatever I'm telling them. So we put it in the book. And you know a guy named Eric Shawn at Fox News?
Oh, I've heard this. Isn't that the one who's a producer or TV host in Detroit?
No. There may be one in Detroit. This guy's in New York, and he was working on the story.
Right.
Not the story of the story of the book. I mean, the book had just come out. He was handling the book. And an old-timer at the Fox News channel said to him, "Did you know about the editor at the New York Times who was there that night and was a witness to the Gallo killing?" And Eric said, "No, I didn't know that." So he got her name, and he called her up. She was at work in walking distance of his Fox News office. And he asked her, "Were you present when Joey Gallo was killed?" And she said, "Yes, I was." And he said, "So then you were there when those 3 gunmen burst in the back door and opened fire on Gallo?" And she said, "I was there, but there were no three gunmen, I can tell you that. It was a lone gunman." So Eric said to her, "Well," and he sent over a photo of Frank Sheeran to her via the internet that was on in connection with the book. And she said, "Oh my God, this gives me the chills. I know this man." Those were her first comments. And then her second comments were, "It was a lone gunman and it was him." Now we had, I mean, that's like the insanely good corroboration. So these clowns that are out there are dredged up the old story of the 3 gunmen, Sonny Pinto and the 2 brothers, I forget, and they're on the news, promoting these 3 gunmen that long ago disappeared in my book. I mean, it's all in the book.
Right.
And her name was not used because she never wanted it used. And she didn't want to worry her mother. She was the national assignment editor for the New York Times. That meant that on a national subject, no article got written without her signing it on the domestic.
Right. She had a backet that was the valid story.
Yeah, I mean, so then I get a call from a TV show on PBS, something like History's Mysteries. And they wanted to take the Gallo hit as a symbolic for the Hoffa hit, so that if Frank Sheeran is telling the truth about the Gallo hit, then he clearly is telling the truth about the Hoffa hit. Okay?
Yeah.
So they asked me, could I get her to come and be a witness to History's Mysteries? So I asked her. I just took a shot. And she said, "I will, but I won't let my face be used or my name be used."
Yeah.
And she did. And she did the same type of a photo display that I had showed her. They showed her one.
Yeah.
And she picked them out immediately. Boom. Then
Wow.
when they were getting ready to do the film, and they wanted to do that scene, they wanted to know if she'd come into the to Marty's house and draw them a diagram, and she did. And so,
This is Marty. Charlie, excuse me.
Marty.
Excuse me. Martin Scorcese's house?
Yeah, Marty Scorcese's house.
Right.
So she comes over there and meets with me and Scorsese and De Niro and Steve Zalian, and she draws the diagram for them of what the place looked like and which door the big shooter came in and where he went inside the which she had already done for me, but she was doing it again for them.
Wow.
So then they pronounced, as a result of that display of hers, they pronounced that Frank Sheeran did the killing.
Were there other witnesses too, Charlie, that came forward?
No one else came forward. And nobody does in a mob hit. I mean, this is Little Italy. And she didn't come forward.
Yeah.
She went home. She was there with her sister, her girlfriend and her girlfriend's brother and wife. And they, as soon as the shooting stopped, she said, as soon as the broken glasses stopped hitting the floor, we got up and ran out. And we didn't wait for the police. We didn't talk to anybody. Oh, I'll tell you one thing. The chief investigating officer was a guy named Joe Coffey, who founded the organized crime homicide unit of the NYPD.
Right.
And he wrote a letter to I wrote this up in Playboy, her story.
Yeah.
And he endorsed it and said that I solved the Crazy Joe Gallo hit. His hit.
What kind of weapons did Frank use to carry out his hits? Was it something that Russell would give him for the job, or did he have his own pistols that he would use?
He had his own array of pistols. But for a job like this, for the killing of Crazy Joe Gallo, he used two pistols.
Okay. Wow.
38 and a 32, if you want to know.
Well, okay.
But he had his own.
Right.
He had his own, and he also on one of the murders, Cantemi, he used a .357.
Right. And in the case of Jimmy Hoffa, what weapon did he use? Did he disclose that?
38.
Was he okay?
And
wow. So
in the book,
So I wanted to ask, did Frank go into detail about what was going on in the 30 minutes before the hit happened on Jimmy Hoffa?
Yeah.
They went they had lunch, or I mean, didn't they go to lunch? They had lunch first.
They stopped on cigarette breaks. The wives took cigarette breaks, and they would stop for cigarette breaks. They stopped overnight at a Howard Johnson's, and it's in the book. Right. That was they were on their way. What the movie has, the book has. So if you see an airplane, that was the airplane.
Right. Okay, well, great. Well, Charlie, listen, thanks so much for giving Quorum Radio the opportunity to talk with you today. And are you coming out with another book too? Perchance, is there another one in the Charlie Brandt?
Yes, I'm working on another one now. But the book I'm focusing on now is The Right to Remain Silent. That's the one we're launching, and the one that I'm putting some effort into. But I am working on another book. Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic.
So to speak.
So this is going to become a movie. This is going to also become a movie, right, Charlie?
The Right to Remain Silent?
Yeah, what do you think?
I believe it will be. It's very cinematic, and the story is. If I tell you quickly what the story is, a very sophisticated interrogator named Lou Razzie gets framed, and he goes to jail for 2 years. He had some counterfeit money planted on him, And when he gets out, he goes to a place called South America. You may have heard of it.
Never heard of it. Never heard of it.
Yeah, and he goes to Brazil, and he got a job opal mining in Brazil. While he's there, he gets a call from his own old former partner in the Wilmington Police Department, who says that you've just been cleared from the crime of the counterfeit money by a guy who went into the witness protection program and had to admit everything he did. And one of the things he admitted was that he had framed you on behalf of some other people. And if you return to Delaware now and work one day as a police officer, it bridges the 15 years and you get your pension. So he comes to Wilmington to do his day and get his pension, and he gets drawn back into police work. But in the 15 years, police work has changed drastically. And he has so much to learn and so much to compare with what he was able to do and what he can't do anymore. And it's very entertaining. The reviews were, back in when it first came out, the reviews were incredible. Just when you thought you heard every story, along comes a guy like Brandt, you know.
Oh, wow.
Well, I told you that Reagan was out of the blue sent me a letter.
Yeah,
you know,
so here you are.
And that's on the back of... That's on the back of the book, the Reagan.
Wow, so quote. I mean, so Charlie, just give me a little digression into that. I mean, you're home. I guess at the time, were you living in Wilmington, or where were you living? Or did it happen?
When I wrote this?
I don't.
When
Reagan wrote you? Well, when Reagan...
I was living in Wilmington, yeah.
So you're at home, and your wife brings in the mail.
Well, he mailed me at work. You know, he didn't have my phone. You know, I didn't know the man. You know, he got my work number, my work address, and mailed it to me. I had it and the autograph and the original letter framed and on the wall.
Wow, pretty exciting, Charlie. So
it was very very, very exciting.
Wow. So
and that's that book had the better reviews than any book I've ever seen. Much less, I mean, when the President of the United States writes you.
Well, yeah, that's good. I hope that's on Amazon. You know,
it's
or on the back of the flap.
I'm sorry, what?
I said it's open. I hope it's on the back flap of the book. The book has to have. Hopefully, it has what Reagan said in the letter.
Yeah, it's on the back of. Yeah, it's on the back of the book. It's on the back of the book as a blurb on the back of the book.
Well, you know, I tell you something.
About a paragraph.
Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah, so Charlie, listen, QUORUM Radio, grateful to have you on the show. Great stories. I have to make this...
My pleasure, Bill. Believe me, over the years, we've had a lot of chats, and this was long overdue.
Yes, I'm very lucky, Charlie, to have this. I hope we can do another interview or two. And I'm hoping, I'm just curious, I'd like to hear, I'm sure Michael Francese will have a couple of words in response, and I'm hoping to let him open up his doing tape, more interviews.
Let him open up his tape recorder, because who has my tapes? The FBI, as we speak. They subpoenaed them.
Yeah.
So
and the Hoffa's memo.
I don't give too much of an opportunity for fakers. So if he wants to write a book, he can.
Yeah, sure.
But if he wants to come out of nowhere, with stuff that has no evidence attached to it, it's not worth my time.
Absolutely.
So I had to keep to myself during the making of the film, and I had to adhere to whatever Netflix wanted. Now that the film's over, I can take people like Peggy Noonan and Michael Franzese and a couple of the other people and set them straight. But it's not something I'm going to do too much of. It's not worth it to me. I've moved on.
Sure.
I've got a new book I'm promoting.
Yeah.
So The Right to Remain Silent. If you want to have me on again, it will be on that book.
Absolutely.
Right to Remain Silent.
Positively, yeah. I just definitely want to make that as a talk. It's a fascinating book, and it was really kind of the basis.
And I could explain to you how where the real crimes are, where the real murders are. Here's the real murder that I investigated. Here's this person questioning a murder suspect. Those are the exact words I used.
Right. Sure.
You know, that's what I'm doing now. I'm promoting the right to remain silent.
That's great. Okay, Charlie
and I'm sure you'll help me do that.
Positively, Charlie.